Welcome to my channel. It's nice to see you here. This is a video with very interesting book called The Shadow That Gives Birth to Light. So take some hot drinks, some cookies, and let's start. And please don't forget to like and comment this video. And of course follow my channel. The Shadow That Gives Birth to Light. Chapter 1. Ashes of the House. The fire takes away the whole family from Lyra, the only surviving one. She wanders around the fire and finds the charred suspension of her mother, which begins to tremble strangely in her hands. Lyra woke up from the sharp smell of smoke. At first it seemed to her that it was another morning. Fog from the river that had risen higher and dragged the yard. But the air was too hot, and the light outside the window was too orange. She sat on the bed, trying to figure out why her heart was pounding as if it wanted to break. Out of her chest, scream. The only one, short, broken, father's voice. Lyra rushed to the door and almost fell when the board cracked under her feet. The house was already on fire. The fire hissed in the corners, past her, as if alive. She ran down the corridor, trying to see through the smoke at least someone close to her. But the answer was only the roar of the flame. "Mom," she exclaimed, but her voice disappeared in a hot delirium. The flames blocked the way to her parents' room, and Lyra, out of breath, broke the window and jumped outside. The ground under it was covered with fire, and the roof had already begun to set. She saw the shadows moving outside the windows. Maybe it was people, or maybe it was just her imagination, broken by fear. When the roof fell, the world froze. No screams, no movement, only the hissing of fire, which devoured wood, clothes, memory. Lyra stood with her arms around herself and could hear nothing but the pulse in her own ears. Then, when the flames subsided and only thick black smoke remained, she came closer. Charred pieces of furniture peeked out of the ashes, rooms that once seemed so cozy. She stepped cautiously, as if afraid to disturb the silence. Something flashed among the ashes. Lyra bent down and lifted the small pendant. On the burnt chain, her mother's. She remembered how her mother stroked her hair and whispered softly, "This is the amulet of our family, daughter. He will always bring you home." Now there was no home. The suspension suddenly shuddered slightly in her palm. Lyra shuddered herself. Did it seem to her, or did the metal really move? She squeezed the amulet, and a faint wave of heat ran down her hand. Not at all like the heat of the fire. "Why you?" she whispered, as if the suspension could respond. The answer came in a different way. From the side of the forest, there was a long, tearful sound, not the cry of an animal, not the creak of a tree, as if someone was calling. Lyra raised her head. The smoke was above the ground, and through it the forest looked unnaturally dark. It's like a cloud has fallen to the ground. She took a step back, but the suspension trembled again, this time more noticeably, as if pulling her forward. Lyra once again examined the heat, what was left of her life, and then, clutching the suspension so hard that the metal got into the skin, she stepped towards the forest. Thus began the path, which would take much more from her than she could have imagined, and at the same time return what she never knew. Chapter 2. The Last Lullaby. Summary. Lyra hears a voice in her dreams that hums a familiar melody. She realizes that the lullaby opens up memories that someone is trying to hide. Chapter text. Lyra did not remember how she got to the abandoned barn on the edge of the forest. When she lost her strength, when she stopped, everything merged into one foggy ball. The only thing she felt clearly was the suspension. She was hot, as if alive, and with every step it throbbed in time with her heart. The shed greeted her with the smell of old hay and the coolness that she hugged, as if she wanted to hide from the world. Lyra settled in the corner, pulling the old bag on herself, and fatigue finally absorbed her. The dream came immediately, but not the one that brings peace. She stood on the bank of the river. The water was dark and motionless, like a mirror waiting to look into it. The fog spread over the water, and a melody came from the fog, soft, familiar, the kind she heard from her mother as a child. Sleep, my star. Sleep quietly. Lyra stepped forward, and the fog parted. On a stone near the water sat a woman with blonde hair that fell in waves. Her face was fuzzy, as if painted on a wet canvas, but Lyra knew it was a mother. "Wait," she shouted and held out her hand. The woman returned, and the lullaby broke off. Her eyes were empty, dark, similar to two mirror surfaces, where the sky is reflected before the storm. "Don't look," a whisper was heard. Lyra looked back, but didn't see anyone. "Don't look at her eyes. Someone took the light. Someone hid it where you haven't been yet." The suspension on her neck suddenly burned her skin, so much that she screamed. The mother got up from the stone. Her movements were broken, as if she couldn't remember how to control her body. The woman took a step towards Lyra. "Mom," whispered the girl. The woman stretched out her hand. "There are ashes on my fingers. There are dark drops on the palm that look like frozen shadows. You have to find a lullaby. Real, not the one you remember, the one you didn't get to hear." Her voice cracked, as if it sounded through her burnt throat. Suddenly, a shadow rose from the fog. Tall, narrow, with curved arms. She approached her mother. Lyra screamed, but her legs grew to the ground. She saw the shadow touching the woman's shoulder. Mother came back for the last time. Her face became almost human, full of pain and forgiveness. "I'm sorry," and the shadow dissolved it in itself. Lyra woke up with a suppressed scream. The breath broke out abruptly, like a man who had just run out of the fire. The suspension was throbbing, now cold, like ice. "Why did you show it to me?" she whispered, clutching the amulet. But the answer was silence, the same one that remained after the lullaby. Lyra stood up. The night outside the windows of the barn was thick, merciless. But now she knew there was a song she had to find. A song that can tell the truth about her family. And someone in the dark doesn't want her to hear her. Chapter 3. Orphan Bread. The morning greeted Lyra with cold and emptiness. The barn that sheltered her for the night seemed even older than yesterday. But at least it was real, not a dream, not a delusion, not a vision of a mother disappearing in the fog. Lyra went outside. Silence hung with a thick cloth that covered the world. Even the birds seemed to be silent. The girl rubbed her eyes, trying to chase away the remnants of the nightmare, and moved along the path towards the nearest village. The road ran between the fields, where the dry wind chased the field. Lyra walked fast. She felt that she could not stop. The suspension on the chest was heavier today than yesterday, as if it had been filled with a shadow from that dream. When she reached the village, the sun was already high. People fussed around the houses. 2 men carried bags of grain. Women hung laundry. But as soon as Lyra stepped on the main street, the traffic slowed down and the conversation stopped. The eyes fell into the back. She didn't need to look back. She felt that people could see something behind her shoulder or in herself. She approached the bakery, a small building with a cracked sign. The aroma of bread beat in the chest stronger than fear. "Good afternoon," she said softly, going inside. The baker, a burly man with a red beard, froze. His gaze slid over her face and stopped on the suspension. "Are you from that farm?" he asked hoarsely. "Yes, but," he burned. Lyra lowered her eyes. "I know." The man sighed heavily, took a warm loaf from the table and handed it to her. "Take it and get out of here." "But I don't have any money." I said go. His voice was not angry, he was scared. She came out, pressing the bread to her chest. On the street, the villagers stopped to look at her. Someone crossed paths. Someone turned the child away. "I didn't do anything to you," Lyra exclaimed, but the answer was only silence. She ran, through the field, past the old willow, until she was alone. She sat on the ground. The bread fell out of her hands. "Why are they looking at me like that?" she whispered, clutching the suspension. The metal responded with an icy touch, and Lyra realized that something had changed in her, something that people are afraid of instinctively. The shadows began to move, and they moved with her. Chapter 4. The Forest That Does Not Sleep. Twilight fell quickly. as if someone from above extinguished the light with his hands. Lyra entered the forest stretching like a black wall on the horizon, and immediately felt that this world was breathing differently. It's cold, thick, old. The leaves rustled underfoot, but the sounds did not spread to the sides. They were absorbed by darkness, which became thicker with each step. The girl stopped, looking forward. The trees stood in even rows, but their shadows. Shadows lived their own lives. The wind barely swayed the tops, and the shadows slid below, like water trying to get out of the shores. Lyra inhaled the air and smelled the raw earth, moss and something ancient that existed here long before people. "It's just a forest," she whispered, although she couldn't believe the words herself. One of the shadows separated from the trunk of an old oak tree. She moved slowly, swaying, as if remembering how to use her hands and feet. Lyra took a step back. The shadow stopped. Her shape was human, at least approximately, but there was no face. Only emptiness, deeper than the night. "Don't. You have to." A whisper cut through the air. Lyra was sweating. It was a dead language, the one spoken by the long-gonest tribes, which the elders told about only in fairy tales. A language that has not sounded in the world for centuries. "Who are you?" Lyra barely gathered her voice. The shadow tilted her head. "You wear a sign." Lyra's gaze fell on the suspension. The metal pulsated with warmth, as if reacting to the presence of a creature. "I don't know what that means," the girl whispered. "You will learn, in the light of the dark paths." The shadow retreated back and began to melt like ashes scattered by the wind. The other shadows returned to their places, imitating the trees again. The forest has become normal again, but only outside. Lyra felt that he was looking at her now. He remembers her, and he will never let go. Chapter 5. Alien Eyes in the Dark. The night covered the forest with a heavy blanket. Lyra moved along the path that the shadow called dark. Although it was the same as the others, at least at first glance, the ground underfoot seemed softer than it should have, as if something invisible was breathing under a layer of fallen leaves. She walked quickly, pressing the suspension with her hand. The metal was warm, and that was more worrying than the cold surroundings. Suddenly, something crunched in the dark. Lyra turned around abruptly. The night was empty, too empty. She took a step forward and saw them. Eyes. Two yellow balls hanging in the dark, having no body. They looked at her with an unblown look that had something human, and at the same time completely alien. The eyes came closer, and the darkness around them began to take shape. The creature came out of the darkness. The figure looked like a human, but with distorted proportions, as if someone was trying to assemble it according to someone else's drawing. The skin is too pale. The hands are too long, and the eyes. Lyra saw their own fear in them. Myself, small, lonely, lost. Her horrors were reflected there, multiplying, living. "What? Are you like that?" She exhaled. The creature did not respond. "I just took a step, then another one." The footsteps were silent, as if she was sliding above the ground. Lyra retreated, but the roots under her feet got hooked on something, and she fell. The creature stopped over her, bent down, extending her hand with two long fingers. The eyes shone brighter. Fear pressed on the chest. The girl could hardly breathe. The pendant on her neck flashed with light. Clean, sharp, cold. The creature howled. The sound was similar to the rustling of 100 dry leaves, mixed with crying. She jumped back, as if the light was burning her. "And not light," burst out of her throat. Lyra rose to her feet. The pendant shone brighter and brighter, forming a thin circle of light around it, similar to a protective contour. The creature disappeared between the trees so quickly that Lyra did not have time to notice the moment when she was no longer visible. Silence fell like a heavy stone. The girl stood in the middle of the forest, grabbing the air, and the suspension pulsated with light for a long time, as if it reminded. The danger had not disappeared. She just retreated. Chapter 6. City Without Voices. Lyra stepped on the cobblestone street of the city. and the first thing that caught her eye was silence. Not the one that happens at night, but incomprehensible, densely saturated, pressing to the ground. People moved slowly, looking down, and their voices were whispers, as if they were afraid that the word itself could cause death. She walked through the narrow streets, watching the windows. The glass windows were closed. Her faces were hidden behind the curtains. Some doors were covered with chains. The city looked crushed by fear, and Lyra felt it, not even knowing why. When she stopped near the fountain in the central square, she felt a slight disturbance of air. Someone was watching her. The same eyes that scared her in the forest, or something like that, were hidden in the shadows. "Someone is following me," she whispered. A man appeared from the shadows. He did not walk. He did not touch the ground. He just showed up, and Lyra realized that he was not a person. His gaze pierced, revealed the deepest fears. The girl retreated. The metal of the suspension on her neck suddenly cooled down, and Lyra felt the pull, as if the amulet knew the way out. She rushed into one of the streets, and the man instantly disappeared as he emerged. The streets intertwined, and Lyra felt that the city was joking with her, making her confused and lose her bearings. The people she met quickly closed the door, turned away, hiding their eyes. They were not just afraid of her. They felt the presence of something else next to her. Lyra realized she is no longer the child these streets once knew. She became the one who was hunted, and those who dared to look at her felt an invisible threat. The girl hid in a dark alley, pressing the pendant to her heart. She realized one truth. In this city, voices are silent for a reason. Life here is not worth safe silence, and it is this silence that can be deadly. Chapter 7. Cold stars above the roofs. Night fell over the city. Lyra stood on the roof of an old house, feeling the cold strings of wind on her face. A rustle came from the attic. It was not just footsteps. They were hunters. She listened. A few voices, muffled, almost a whisper. The men discussed who they were looking for, and one name was constantly repeated, like a curse. "She's already here," whispered one. Lyra squeezed the suspension on her neck. Her heart was pounding, as if the amulet was responding to every word. "They know about me," she thought, "and I'm important to them." The voice of another hunter sounded cold. "Without it, our plan will not work. She's the key." Lyra stepped back on the roof, feeling a rotten tile pouring under her feet. She couldn't let them get caught. At the same time, she understood that her strength attracted the attention of these people. The quiet barking of dogs was lingering from the street. The moon of the worlds with cold light, scattering shadows on the roofs. Lyra realized that she was now herself, and at the same time part of a larger game in which her life and strength play a decisive role. She took a breath, inhaled the cold night, and the suspension heated up a little, as if encouraging her to move on. Lyra felt that she could not stay in place. Her path was just beginning, and more than her own survival depends on this path. Chapter 8. Quiet Deal. Lyra walked through the dark streets of the city, feeling that someone was watching. Suddenly, a man in a dark cloak appeared in front of her. His face was hidden under the hood, and his eyes glowed with a strange light. "You're looking for the truth," his voice was quiet, but every word cut through the air, and it's more dangerous than you can imagine. Lyra took a step back. "Who are you?" she asked. "I can show you what they're hiding from you," he said, extending his hand. "But it takes a deal." She felt cold in her chest. Her instincts told her it was dangerous, but the desire to know about the family was stronger than fear. "I'm listening," Lyra said. The man smiled under the hood. "You will follow me, listen, and do what I say. In return, you will get the truth." Lyra held her breath. Every cell of her body screamed about danger, but she knew that without this step she would not know anything. "Good. I agree." He stretched out his hand, and Lyra squeezed it, feeling a faint stream of energy flowing from the touch. The pendant on the neck heated up in response to this pact. "Now your life belongs to the choice you make, and not all elections lead to light," the leader whispered. Lyra nodded. She felt that she had made a deal not only with her safety, but also with a fate that would change everything she knew about the world and about herself. Chapter 9. Awakening of Blood. The moon flew over the roofs of the city, scattering the cold light that fell on the cobblestones like thin ice. Lyra walked through the narrow alleys, feeling the suspension on her neck as if pulsating to the beat of her heart. Each step sounded louder than she expected, and it seemed that the shadow behind her back was not just following, but coming to life, responding to her thoughts and emotions. She tried to calm her breathing. "It's just fear," I thought. But the feeling was deceiving. Fear never trembled in her veins, as her own blood did now. The suspension suddenly heated up, forcing Lyra to stop. The metal in his hands became soft, like a heated candle, and a barely noticeable red shadow began to come out of it. She braided the girl's fingers, weaving into her venous pulse. Lyra's heart tightened with pain and at the same time with indescribable excitement. "What is this?" she whispered, looking at the trembling amulet. The shadow that had always hidden behind her shoulder rose and touched her hand. Lyra felt the force begin to awaken in her veins. Heat spilled over her body, enveloping her fingers, shoulders, heart. She raised her hand into the air, and a thin ray of light appeared between her fingers, cutting through the darkness of the alley. The light grew, mixing with the red shades of the suspension. The feeling was both fascinating and terrible. It was not her power in the usual sense. It was the blood that awakened, combining light and shadow into a single whole. "My strength," she said softly, and the words crumbled into the cold air. "Is it me? Is it really me?" There was no answer. Only a shadow moved behind her shoulders, wrapping itself around like a snake. She dragged Lyra forward, towards the unknown, and Lyra walked, feeling how every step changed her body. Muscles have become stronger, reflexes faster, and mind sharper. And at the same time, something was cracking inside. The suspension began to emit flashes of red light. Each outbreak depicted her fears, losses, and unknown potentials. Lyra felt that the shadow of the suspension was not just an echo of the past. It was a part of herself, part of the blood and light that are intertwined into a single. She stopped on a narrow bridge over the dry bed of the river. The darkness around seemed deaf, as if the night itself was breathing her fears. And here, for the first time, Lyra used force completely. She raised her hands above her head, and the light from the suspension broke through the darkness, illuminating the bridge and casting shadows so that they bent like paper. "I can control it," Lyra whispered, feeling the blood and the power of the suspension merge into one. Then a feeling flashed, as if an invisible hand touched her consciousness. Lyra knew that this was the first glimpse of what she could do, but at the same time she realized that the responsibility was extremely great. Now she was not just a girl who survived. Now she was the source of new power, and the fate of the larger world will depend on how she uses it. The first flash of red light merged with the darkness of the night, and Lyra stood there, feeling not just alive, but part of something old and powerful. Her blood woke up, her shadow was fueled, and she finally realized, this is just the beginning. Chapter 10. Mixed Shadow. Lyra walked along the forest path, where every tree seemed alive and the leaves rustled, as if whispering ancient secrets. The air was heavy and saturated with the smell of dampness and moss, and the shadow that accompanied her from. The fire now began to react to her movements. She didn't just follow, she got up, wrapped her arms around her arms, braided her legs, and even lightly touched her face, as if testing the new strength that was born in her body. Suddenly, an alien appeared among the trees. His figure was tall, thin, and his skin was not a human shade, rather dark blue, like the night frozen in his body. His eyes glowed with a faint golden light, and his movements were light and silent, as if he was sliding above the ground. "You carry the blood of light and shadows." His voice was quiet, but it reached every cell of Lyra's body. And your strength is not accidental. It's a consequence of what you haven't figured out yet. Lyra felt the suspension on her neck pulsating harder than ever. The shadow that was always there began to mix with her own body, responding to her thoughts and desires. She raised her hand. An array of red light from the pendant cut through the darkness between the trees, illuminating the strange figure. "Show me who I am," Lyra whispered. The alien approached, and now his golden eyes were looking straight into her soul. He stretched out his hand, and from his touch, a wave of understanding passed through Lyra's entire body. The power that awakened in her came from the Shadowlands, a place where light and darkness always mixed, generating creatures and forces capable of balancing or destroying the world. "Your parents didn't just live, they kept their balance," the alien continued. "Now this responsibility is on you. You must learn to control the mixed shadow inside you. Otherwise, it will burn everything around you." Lyra first realized the scale of what was happening. Her strength was not just the ability of light or shadow, but a unique mix of both principles, born from the blood of her family and the secrets hidden in the Shadowlands. "I'm ready," she said, and her voice sounded decisive. Although her heart was pounding with fear, the alien nodded. Lyra's shadow slowly came to life, merging with the suspension beam, and now she could not only feel it, but also control its movements. It was the first true awakening. Its power ceased to be an external gift and became part of itself. "Remember," the alien added before dissolving into the darkness, "not everything that lives in the shadows is an enemy. Not everything that shines is a friend. But if you learn to combine, you will become stronger than any enemy." Lyra was left alone with her new self, feeling a mixed shadow wrap around her body and breathing, becoming a light whisper in her head, and at the same time a amulet ready to protect her from the world. Chapter 11. The Stone That Remembers. The next day, Lyra came to the old stone on the edge of the forest. It was huge, gray and covered with moss, with deep cracks that seemed to tell the stories of ancient generations. The pendant on her neck gently heated as she approached the stone, as if recognizing its strength. Touching the stone, Lyra felt something rising inside her. Not pain, not fear, but a wave of memory that filled every cell. Her consciousness crumbled on memories of the past, and she saw her parents as they were before the tragedy, their love, sacrifice, fear of the dark forces, and how they fought, guarding the family seal. Every image was alive. Lyra saw how her parents whispered the words of the spells, how they touched the pendant and the stone, giving her some of their strength. She felt their pain when they lost loved ones, and their hope when they believed that someone from the Lyra family could continue their cause. "Now I understand," Lyra whispered, tears rolling down her face. "I carry their history in myself." The pendant on the neck lit up more strongly, reacting to the stone and to Lyra's emotions. She felt that now their strength was not only her own, but common. The memory of past generations and her own blood merged into a single whole. Suddenly, the stone vibrated under her touch, and new scenes began to come to life before Lyra's eyes. She saw her mother standing over the amulet, whispering words that Lyra could not yet understand. How her father struggled with the shadow that tried to destroy their home, and how the walls of their house themselves kept the echo of tragedy. "I realized that I didn't just survive," Lyra said. "I'm a continuation of what was destroyed. And now it is up to me whether this power will be a salvation or a curse." She moved away from the stone, feeling how the world around her had changed. Now Lyra knew her journey was just beginning, and there are trials ahead that measure not only her strength, but also her heart. Chapter 12. The 39th Trail. The path that led through the deep forest looked ordinary, but Lyra felt that it was a deception. The darkness here was thick, as if alive, and the leaves underfoot seemed to whisper ancient words. understandable only to those who feel the magic of blood and shadow. Each step deepened Lyra's connection with the suspension. She warmed her neck. The shadow near her shoulder moved synchronously with her breath. An array of red light emphasized the contours of the path, as if the earth itself wanted to test it. "You will pass if the heart is pure." A soft whisper was heard among the trees. Lyra looked back, but didn't see anyone. Soon, figures grew out of the darkness, spirits that tested her fears, doubts, and determination. Some of them recreated the images of her past, the burning of the house, the charred suspension of the mother, the loneliness in the village. Others are the future, where her shadow got out of control and destroyed all living things. Lyra felt how fear wanted to stop her, but she remembered the alien's words. Force is born in a mixed shadow. She took a deep breath, squeezing the suspension. An array of red light cut the figures that had disintegrated into dust. "I'm going on," she said into the dark. "I'm not afraid." The path changed under her feet, showing new obstacles. But now Lyra felt that her heart had become the key. If it is pure, if it accepts itself, nothing can break the way. Chapter 13. Guardians of the Nameless Temple. On the edge of the forest where the path ended, Lyra saw an old temple. Its walls were covered with cracks and moss, and the vaults were bent under the weight of centuries. The doors of the temple were held on loose hinges, but when Lyra stepped on the threshold, she was met by guards, static figures that came to life only when the stranger approached. "Lyra," one of them said silently, and the voice passed through the thoughts. "You carry the blood of the guards." She touched the wall, and the memory of the temple opened. The Lyra family had guarded the ancient seal that restrained the dark forces for generations. Her parents left the signs encrypted, and the pendant was the key to the activation of the seal. "The Dark Ones are trying to break it," said another guard. "And if that happens, the world you know will perish." Lyra felt the suspension heat up more than ever. She realized, now her task is not just to survive, but to become the guardian of the seal, as her ancestors did, and to use the mixed power of shadow and light to confront an unknown threat. Chapter 14. A Life That Shouldn't Have Been. Sitting in the inner courtyard of the temple, Lyra felt the suspension beating like the heart of another creature. Suddenly a voice appeared, quiet but piercing. "You were born by mistake." Lyra's heart raced. The strength that grew in her now began to respond to words. "Your birth violated the natural law," the voice continued. "And because of that, the world began to rot." Lyra couldn't believe it. All her life, she was looking for herself, her family, the reason for her existence. And now that reason was terrible. Her birth is not a blessing, but a breaking of rules for which no one answered. The pendant burned her skin, and the dark shadow that always accompanied Lyra covered her like a veil. But instead of scaring, the shadow showed an alternative, the power that can be used to correct the mistake. I can save the world," Lyra whispered, and the answer was a light, cold light from the suspension. She realized that now her strength is not just blood and magic. It is a chance to change the nature of everything that exists, and it has no right to stop. Chapter 15. Ash Wedding Ring. Lyra slowly stepped over the remains of an old city block that was once teeming with life. Now he looked like a dead heart, burnt houses, twisted metal gates, and silence that pressed on the chest. Every step of Lyra echoed in the empty walls. She found herself in the ruins of her father's house. The walls partially collapsed, the roof was broken, and something metal was visible among the ashes. Lyra knelt down and carefully cleaned up the remnants of the ash. In front of her was a wedding ring, ashen, cracked, but retained its shape. The wedding ring seemed strange to her. It was not a simple metal ornament. It felt the pulse, like the heart of the house itself. Lyra lifted it, and the heat from the metal went through her entire body. "What are you going to tell me?" she whispered, as if the wedding ring could answer. And the answer came not in words, but in memories. The wedding ring belonged to the father and was the key to the family heritage, which the dark forces sought to destroy. Through her, Lyra could feel the line of continuity of her family, a power that was passed down from generation to generation, and that must be protected at the cost of everything. The pendant on the neck warmed up, and the shadow near Lyra's shoulder came to life, braiding the arm and the wedding ring, as if recognizing her right to inheritance. Now Lyra felt that her strength was not just in blood or shadow. She was in the entire history of the family, in her loss and the memory that was preserved in these things. She slowly stood up, holding the wedding ring in her hand, and realized that now the responsibility for the world was no longer abstract. She was in her hands. Every breath, every step, every surprise is a step towards deciding whether it will use the inheritance for salvation or cause a new disaster. Chapter 16. A house that does not accept. Lyra returned to her destroyed house. Ashes and soot covered everything that remained of childhood memories. She stepped cautiously, afraid of touching the debris, but felt the suspension around her neck pulling her forward. In the depths of the house, she saw a shadow. At first, Lyra thought it was a play of light, but then the shadow gathered in a silhouette that familiarly resembled a mother. The mother's face was blurred, but with eyes that reflected fatigue and longing. "You're back," the shadow whispered. "But are you ready to meet the truth?" Lyra felt her heart tighten. In the hands, the wedding ring pulsated with warmth, and the pendant lightened, reminding, "It is not alone." "I'm ready," Lyra replied, although fear was pounding in her chest. The shadow of the mother began to talk about things that Lyra could never hear from a living mother. About the dark forces that followed her family, about the seal guarded by her ancestors, and about the choices that Lyra must make to avoid repeating the tragedy. The words of the shadow swept Lyra to the depths of her soul, and she felt that the house was no longer just empty. It was alive, remembered, and judged. Only she could open or close the secrets hidden here. And when Lyra left the house, her mother's shadow disappeared, leaving a light breath of ashes and memories that will never disappear. Chapter 17. Heart with a Crack. When Lyra walked through the forest after the house, she felt a new wave of energy inside her. The dark part of her power has awakened, alien, dangerous, but inseparable from her own essence. The beam of the suspension turned red and thick. The shadow near the shoulder crumbled into small segments that revolved around it as if they were alive. Lyra felt pain. Every breath and movement awakened the dark half of her strength. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, clutching the suspension. There was no answer, only a light shadow breath. But later, Lyra felt that the dark force was not the enemy. It reflected the fears, losses, and unused opportunities that accumulated in the family. It was a test and a shield at the same time. "I have to learn to control you," Lyra said, looking at the dark part of herself in the light of the suspension. "And otherwise, we will both die." And then the first real fusion occurred. Light and shadow merged into one, not destroying each other, but creating a new force, stronger than any of the two separately. Lyra felt not just the master of magic, but part of something more. Her power was now not only a weapon, but a living organism that breathed with her. Chapter 18. Watchman of the Dead Paths. Lyra stepped onto a narrow path that led through a gloomy forest, where the trees looked bizarre, like people disguised as bark. The air became thicker, heavy from the smell of raw earth and old secrets. The pendant on her neck heated up and throbbed, and the dark shadow near her shoulder moved synchronously with her heart, as if warning of danger. Suddenly he grew out of the darkness, the guardian of the dead paths. His figure was tall and unnaturally thin. His eyes were black as a void, reflecting all possible deaths. He didn't speak, but Lyra felt his gaze penetrate every corner of her soul. I'm not afraid," she said, clutching the suspension. The guard slowly approached, and the air around him squeezed, as if reality itself was testing Lyra's strength. He showed her a vision. She was falling. Her friends were dying, and even her own heart stopped. Every death was a reflection of her fear. Every step forward was a test of determination. Lyra closed her eyes and remembered everything that had passed. The fire, the loss of her family, the lullaby, the suspension, the wedding ring. She felt a new power, not just a shadow and light, but her own determination. "I will pass," she said, and the dark half of her strength mixed with the light, creating a shield. The watchman observed several series of deaths that had now dissolved in the light of the suspension, and then slowly retreated, leaving the trail open. Lyra went further, realizing her strength is now not only in the blood and shadow, but also in the heart, which is not afraid of death. Chapter 19. A song that cuts the air. She walked out into an open clearing, where the silence of the night was so thick that every sound seemed alien. Lyra stopped, took a breath, and felt the suspension on her neck respond to her breathing. "Can I use my voice?" she thought. She dared, with a trembling voice. She began to sing a quiet melody that she heard from her mother in her dreams. And instead of being gentle, the song began to tear the air, cut the darkness like a blade. The shadow that accompanied Lyra rose around, becoming like a living musical instrument, echoing with each sound. The feeling was strange. Each note carried the power of her own blood, the power of her inheritance, and at the same time the fears she once hid deeply. The song broke the darkness, opened invisible paths, and stopped the creatures that followed it. "It's unbelievable," Lyra whispered, feeling that her voice had become a weapon. Now she could influence the world with a cutting melody, change reality, and control the power that was awakening inside. The song continued until the night began to slowly recede, and Lyra realized her voice was not just a tool, but a way to balance the light and shadow within herself and influence the world around her. Chapter 20. Silence before the light. The world froze in anticipation. Lyra stood on the edge of a tall cliff, looking at the city that had not yet woken up. She knew the last road was ahead, and she couldn't go alone. "I can't do it alone," Lyra thought, and the suspension responded with warmth, as if supporting her decision. She began to look for allies, those who survived, those who were ready to go with her. Each step felt difficult. People were afraid. Shadows were hiding, and even the light seemed tense, waiting for a choice. Gathering allies, Lyra felt the burden of responsibility. Every soul that joined placed hope in her, and together they were more than just a group. They were a living chain capable of changing the course of the future. Darkness and light met in her heart, mixed and stronger than any power separately. Lyra knew that she had a choice ahead of her that would change everything: her family, the world, and even herself. The silence in front of the light was oppressive, but now Lyra was ready, and the world was waiting for her step. Chapter 21. Those who return. Lyra stepped into the fog that covered the old cemetery on the outskirts of the city. The earth was soft and damp, and the air smelled of ancient earth and ash. Suddenly, she felt movement. Invisible hands stretched through the fog, and the shadows that once lay quietly began to rise. The dead came back, but not as they were alive. Their eyes glowed with a cold fire, and their skin took on a gray tint of ash. Lyra felt a fear that pierced her bones, but the pendant on her neck pulsated with a warm light, creating a protective barrier. "I won't give you," she whispered, and the words of her voice turned into strings of power that broke the silence. The dead were approaching, but Lyra noticed something unusual. They were carrying a warning. Through their movements, through the whisper of old language, Lyra realized that they were not enemies, but mediators. They are trying to show the way, to indicate where the dark forces are strengthening their positions. She listened, followed them, and realized that the strength of her inheritance was not only protection. It is able to hear those whom the world has long forgotten, and draw from them knowledge that no one has passed on alive. Chapter 22. Unspelled names. sitting by the lake, where the water was black, like crystal tar. Lyra pulled out her pendant and wedding ring. The metal pulsated, responding to her thoughts. Suddenly, names began to appear around, voices that once belonged to her relatives, and those who were behind the tragedy of the family. "It's them," Lyra whispered. She touched the water, and the reflection became alive. Names surfaced from the depths, each of them as a key to understanding the past. Lyra saw scenes where unknown forces judged her ancestors, where dark plans overshadowed their lives, and where her parents fought but lost because of their own mistakes. The power of the suspension allowed Lyra to understand the truth. Not all names were known, not all duties were fulfilled, and now it was up to her whether she would complete the case that her relatives had started. She recorded every name in memory, allowing the shadow and light to merge inside her, creating an image that could withstand any threat. Chapter 23. Flying After Dark. Lyra stood on the edge of the cliff. The fog disappeared, leaving the starry sky. The pendant and the wedding ring glowed at the same time, and the dark half of her strength was no longer the enemy. It became the wings. "It's time to fly," Lyra whispered, and her voice was as powerful as thunder. She jumped, and instead of falling, flying. Darkness embraced her, light pierced her, and Lyra felt unity with her own strength. She felt her shadow and light merge into a single whole, and how everything that scared her became a tool, not an obstacle. In the air, she saw the past, present, and future at the same time. And although the wind tore her hair and the stars shone with cold light, Lyra felt freedom, the freedom of her own choice. She has taken a step forward into a new world, dark, dangerous, but now subjected to her own strength. Flying after darkness is not an escape, but an admission of who it has become. And now nothing could stop her. Chapter 24. The moment when everything comes together. Lyra stood on the ruins of an ancient temple that was once guarded by her family. The walls were destroyed, but the energy that once held the seal was still vibrating in the air. The air smelled of ashes, fire, and old magic. Every stone seemed to whisper to her, "Everything will be solved here." "I'm ready," Lyra said, clutching the pendant and the wedding ring. She felt the dark force awakening in her heart, and the light merging into a single, powerful energy. From the shadows emerged her opponent, a creature that followed her from birth. She was massive, as if gathered from the darkness and fears of generations, and her eyes glowed with cold fire. "You shouldn't have lived to see this day," said the shadow, and her voice broke the silence, making the earth tremble. Lyra felt a wave of fear, but then remembered everything: the mother's lullaby, the wedding ring, the pendant, the dead bodies that returned, the allies who believed in her. All this became her shield. "My strength is not just light or shadow. She's my will," she shouted. By releasing energy through the pendant and wedding ring, Lyra created a shield of light that repelled the dark creature. The shadow howled, mixed with the dust, and became part of her fears again. But this time Lyra controlled them. The battle was not only physical, it was a game of freedom. Every blow, every note of her voice cut through the darkness. Every flash of light merged with the dark energy into a single force. She felt her body and spirit become one with the world, and it gave her an advantage. The dark creature tried to attack again, but Lyra created a barrier of light and shadow that did not give in. She felt the heart of the universe in every breath, in every shadow an array of light. "This is the end, for you," Lyra shouted, and the last burst of energy tore the darkness, leaving behind silence and light that broke through the ruins. The shadow dissolved completely, leaving only the memory of the struggle. Lyra fell to her knees, inhaling the night air. She knew that everything that had brought her here, and now the road is open. Chapter 25. Born of Light. The morning on the temple site was clean and calm. Lyra stood on the ruins, looking at the sun rising above the horizon. Warm light spilled over the ruins, and she felt a new power within her, a force that united light and shadow, fear and courage, past and future. She lifted the wedding ring and pendant, and they lit up at the same time, creating an aura that filled the air with energy. Lyra realized she gave birth to a new path for the world. Its power could not only destroy, but also restore, create new opportunities. Hope for those who remained. She passed through the ruins of the city, and the people who feared her now watched with curiosity and trust. The dark shadows disappeared, leaving only peace and light behind. Lyra realized who she was. Not just an heiress of strength, not just a girl who lost her family. She became the embodiment of harmony, capable of transforming the world, accepting itself completely and giving light to those who lost it. She climbed to the top of the hill and looked at the horizon. The world was still dangerous, still full of darkness. But now there was room for hope in it. And Lyra was the light that leads forward. "I don't live only for myself," she said. "I live to carry the light." The pendant and wedding ring shone in the sun, and the dark part of her power was no longer frightening. She became part of the new. Lyra, born of light. The world opened the way for her, and now she could pass it without fear. And from that moment on, everything began anew, not as the end, but as a new life born of light. Thank you for listening to this story till the end. I have more good stories on my channel. Subscribe to not lose it. I will be very grateful for your support. Likes, comments. Hope to see you soon. Bye.